Thanks, everybody. Glad to be back. I was very excited and happy to see the companions walking in the door. I was wondering how I was going to begin this presentation. I told Cheryl a little story. I'm going to share it with you because in addition to the CJP, I also do the Twin Cessna Flyers organization, which is put on by Bill Alberts. And this past year, I had the opportunity to take my wife. It was in Nashville, Tennessee. And Bill Alberts, Sr., caught my wife in the hallway and asked her if she'd like to attend the companion luncheon. She said, sure. So she went, she had lunch. I caught up with her later on, and she said, she introduced herself as, Danielle Basili, and my husband's giving the safety stand down. He's the accident investigator. And she said right away, they all launched into, oh my God, you won't believe what my husband has done in our airplane. Mine landed at gear up. Mine's done that twice. Mine took us to the wrong airport. She said it got so much chatter, they broke off into a session. So I'm thrilled that the ladies are here. Thank you very much for attending. I think that for those of you who are using a safety matrix, the line item of, is my wife happy with this, should be like at the top of your list. And if that's a no, then you shouldn't be going on that flight. So I'm going to jump right in to my agenda slide, which is basically what I'm going to cover for you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Air Safety Investigations Department at Textron Aviation, what we do and how we do it within the NTSB party system. I'm going to cover the 2017 accidents for you last year, and I've kind of broken that up even more so for all the individual notifications that we had, and I'm going to show you the different trend items that we're seeing. Not necessarily stuff that leads to accidents, but things that you could definitely improve on to improve your safety, which is what this is all about. And then 2017 preliminary case studies, we had 3 citation accidents that we actually investigated. I've added a 4th because at the end of the year we had another runway excursion. It kind of rolled over into early this year for our investigation purposes, but it's an excellent case study, and because of how many excursions we've had, I thought I'd add that in there, plus there's video. And then I'm going to also go back to 2016 real quick, and I'm going to talk about the Citation 500 that I worked up in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. And I'm going to bring in a 172 this year, 172P, because I kind of like what Rob was talking about this morning with the single engines. You guys all learned to fly in single engine airplanes. There's lessons to be learned out of all of these case studies. In fact, just curious, who still owns a single engine airplane? Perfect. So this will be another good lesson for you. Since it's a safety stand down, I wanted to include a slide of some of the things maybe to consider as I go through some of these case studies. Your instrument currency and proficiency, there is a difference. It's one thing to be legal, it's another thing to be really good at it. I'm really glad that everyone was able to land here yesterday in minimums. And know your personal minimums. Situational awareness versus spatial disorientation. When I get to the Kelowna, Canada accident, this will be apparent. Mission risk assessment, I'm not sure if you guys have a matrix, if you're using anything like that, but I would highly recommend that. Checklists and memory items. Are you really ready to do the engine failure on takeoff checklist in your head? Have you reviewed it? Do you know all the items? And then aircraft performance, which has been pretty critical with the overruns we've seen. Know your landing numbers. And then training. And again, that's kind of a personal thing. I'm thrilled to see this. This is great. So I'm really happy that you've all jumped on board with that and are continuing your training. So a little brief history on the Air Safety Investigations Department at Textron Aviation. Cessna and Beechcraft ASI history. So back in the day, 60s and 70s, the heyday of our aviation boom, when we were building single engines, line rate ridiculous, less than 30 minutes, they're pushing them out the door. Whenever an accident happened, the NTSB would request help, and we would just pick a project engineer, and they would go out there and assist. It became so much so, and there was so much work, that by the early 1980s, we actually created on-purpose air safety investigations groups. Both companies did. Similar functions to go out, assist the NTSB FAA. We were always the point of contact for the governments, and they would go out to the accident sites. Not much has changed. In March 2014, Textron acquired Hawker and Beechcraft. All kinds of departments integrated, including the air safety investigations groups, and at that time we got up to as many as 10 investigators, which was wonderful because we saw a huge volume of accidents that year, and it was great to have that many people. The last couple of years we've been down to as few as 4. We just got another one on board, so we're doing this with 5 people now, which is great. But after we integrated, we wasted no time in cross-training on each other's products and getting out into the field to work them. Within a couple of months, I was out on a Bonanza. It's hard to see, but that's an inverted Bonanza that flew through some trees in Washington. I was out on site for that one. within a couple of months. And I've done quite a few Beechcraft products since. The job description pretty much remains the same as it was back then. Did I do that? So as the ASI, we're the company OEM, or we are the OEM technical expert. Our job is to go out there and assist the NTSB. We do that through the party system. And we're providing the OEM experience, the expertise, and the assets. There's been plenty of times on site where we've had the opportunity to have a mobile service unit come out. I've had hydraulic mules come down from service centers. We've utilized our field service personnel. So it's great to know that the company's behind us. And one of us is on call all the time. We are the rapid response group at Cessna for accident investigations. If one of our products crashes wherever, I'm the guy who gets the call at 2 in the morning. I've got my bag packed, and I'm on the first flight the next morning to go out to the field to assist the NTSB. And I'll go anywhere in the world. I've had plenty of international trips. Sometimes it takes a little more planning before we launch on something like that, but we do quite a bit. The majority of the stuff that we're working are the legacy products, the 1940s through the 1980s. But we are trained to go out and work everything, right up to the current production Citations, King Airs, and the piston products that are rolling off the line. And it's a lot of products, so it's a lot of training. It's a lot to keep in your head and a lot to keep straight. It's 481 specific models last time we counted up. So that's every single different alpha character change. You got your 210A, B, C, D. There you go. And you can see them broken out there by Cessna and Hawker Beechcraft. So you're never going to remember them all. I know we're not. So we are kind of the unofficial keepers of the legacy data and knowledge. That is every Cessna manual, owner's manual and POH from the Cessna 120s through the 441s, and we catalog this at least twice a year to make sure we've got all that technical stuff on hand. There's a lot of owner's manuals in those file cabinets right there that don't even exist anymore digitally, and we've got the only hard copies. We acquired Beechcraft, so we've got all their stuff too. It's nice to have this at our fingertips because we get a lot of questions because we work a lot of airplanes. It's over 250,000 airplanes that were produced in the 90-year history. Give you an idea of just what that equals in the fleet. It's 53.7% of all general aviation airplanes came out of our manufacturing. So we're trying to affect aviation safety with 5 people. It keeps us extremely busy. And being the largest manufacturer in the world is great. And here's kind of the downside. We also have the most accidents. So, a little NTSB background, AS101 here. The NTSB was made an agency of the Department of Transportation in 1967, and then Congress was smart enough to make them independent in 74. And they are tasked with investigating everything, if you're unfamiliar with this. Aviation, highway, marine, pipeline, railroad, and they also do hazardous materials. They are the agency that's responsible to do probable causes. They issue safety recommendations, they do special studies, and they are also the group that brings the grief counselors and stuff to sites for victims and family member assistance, especially in terms of large airliner accidents. How do they do it? Well, they go out to the accident sites. There's about 45 regional investigators at any one time. They're never going to know all the products. They have to work everything from the Airbuses and the Boeings down to the little Cessna 140s. So they rely on the manufacturers to come on site with them, and they invite us to provide the technical assistance to go through the systems to do these investigations. We work together, we gather all the factual evidence, they write their reports, and then they present that to the 5 board members in Washington, D.C. to vote on their probable causes. I don't want to bore you, but I got to give you some history and some regulations. I always include this in my presentation for a couple of reasons. Mainly, this is the regulation that allows me to do my job. This is the regulation that allows me to be a party to their investigations. And what I've highlighted in blue there is that, I'll just read through it for you. Parties shall be limited to those persons, government agencies, companies, so our company, and associations whose employees, functions, activities, or products, our airplane, were involved in the accident or incident who can provide suitable qualified technical personnel actively to assist in the investigation. That's me. This is why I get to be party member to their investigation. That's paragraph A of 49 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 831. Well, paragraph B says that if you're going to be a party to the investigation, you shall sign the Statement of Party Representatives to NTSB Investigation, also known as the party form. This is the front page of that party form. It's about 8 pages long, and this is kind of the Boy Scout oath of, hey, I'm here to help you, and what we're going to do, the whole idea of what we're going to accomplish. On that front page, that top paragraph, what I've underlined there for you in red tells you that I am there for the purpose of providing technical assistance to the NTSB's evidence, documentation, and fact-finding activities. The last paragraph of that form stipulates, my participation is to assist the NTSB safety investigation and not for the purposes of preparing for litigation. And I include this in this presentation because I get this question all the time. You know, people think that I work for the legal department. I do not. I do not work for the legal department. Our whole objective is not to go out there to cover our butts for litigation. We are there in terms of safety. I work for the Senior Vice President of Engineering, Brad Thress, and the whole reason for what we do is safety for you guys, for the customers. In case you didn't know, a lot of people don't even know. In fact, that was one of the best comments I had after a presentation. I didn't even know you guys existed. I didn't know you were out there making sure that our product was safe. And that felt good. It's nice to get that kind of feedback from people. And that's what we're there to do. Because if I go out and work a 172N and I find something wrong with it, well, guess what? We built 10,000 of those. We're going to have to fix 10,000 airplanes. So that's what we do. We go out, we gather this information, we bring it back to the company. We actually have a continued operational safety group. They sit right downstairs from us in the engineering building. They read our preliminary reports. We share our photographs with them. We can show these people what we find in the field that is wrong. They meet every 2 weeks. They have safety review board meetings. They work very closely, at least once a month, with the ACO, which is right across the runway from us. This is the group that works with engineering to create service bulletins. Beechcraft communicate one-page notifications to go out to owners and operators. They also do Cessna maintenance pilot notices. If you don't have a support.cessna.com account, here you go. Sign up. You can read these. These little one-pagers are great. This is the stuff that I'm finding in the field, information for you, owners and operators. If it rises to the occasion of we really got to get the word out there, we will ask the FAA to issue us a special airworthiness information bulletin or an airworthiness directive. A lot of people don't realize that sometimes too, that it's not like the FAA is leaning on us saying, hey, you need to make an AD. No, we write the service bulletin. We know we need to get it to our customers. We go to them and say, hey, make this an AD. Please make our customers do this. And they do. And we've had many improvements over the years credited to our group for things that we've found in the field. So that's kind of the basic, quick, fast run through, because I know I'm going to be kind of time crunched here, of what we do in the Air Safety Investigations Group. Now, I left this slide blank because I wanted to take a minute to kind of pause. And before I jump into the numbers here, I kind of did this last year too, take a minute to kind of reflect on the fact that the stuff that I'm going to cover here in a minute includes a lot of, most of the time when we're involved, it's because there's fatalities or serious injuries. And it can be pretty sensitive to a lot of people, and I understand that. I always feel like it would be disrespectful if we didn't take the time to recognize that people died in these accidents, and that we are here to go through these to learn from this. There's the age-old adage in aviation of learn from others' mistakes. You won't be around long enough to make them all yourself. It's very true. That being said, let's just jump into this. So, total notifications. These are our numbers, and this has been pretty consistent for the last few years. Total notifications, 1,269. So this is everything that we learn about through the FAA's preliminary accident data run in the morning every day. If we get a fax, if we get an email, whatever, if it's somebody dings a wingtip on a hangar, if somebody lands gear up and they walk away from it, if somebody puts one into a house or a smoking hole, this is all added up, 1,269. And I broke them out for you. Cessna 956. Of those 956 notifications of the Cessna product line, 43 of those were citations in 2017. 301 Beechcraft. So just give you a better idea of the differences in manufacturing. Cessna just made more airplanes than Beech over the years, and we see that in our accident numbers. Beechcraft Defense, we had no accidents with our defense products in 2017. And 12 for Textron Aviation. So these are airplanes that are produced now currently under our Textron Aviation data plates. They're under our type certificate data sheet for Textron Aviation. Injury accidents. So in 2017, we had 157 fatal or serious injury accidents. 118 of those were on the Cessna products. The 3 citations, and these are the ones I'm going to cover for you here in our preliminary case studies. 37 of them were from Beechcraft, and 2 Textron Aviation. Total investigations for us were 160 last year. 93 of those were field launch accidents. That's where we grab our go bag and run out the door and go look at the airplane in the field. I worked 24 of those. 3 of them were the citations, which I'm going to cover, And then non-field is anytime we get enough information worthy enough to write a report. And then others are anytime we do additional work. We get calls all the time from local FSDOs, the Flight Safety District offices. Somebody runs out of gas, they need a fuel chart, they want a landing performance chart, that kind of stuff. So if we help in the investigations, and some of these others are more drawn out, but we record everything in our department, as you'll come to see. I wanted to include this slide because this is a great data set now that we have been together with Beechcraft. 2014, we really came together in March. The numbers were a little skewed, so this is a great data set. This is 3 years. The bad thing about this is our notifications are going up. 1175 up to 1269. The fatal and serious injury accidents in 2015 was the highest we had seen, 184. It dropped down to 140, we're up to 157. I went ahead and looked at our accident log the other day, and it was 147 for this year. So we've got 2 months left in the year. I suspect we're going to blow right through the 157, and we'll probably be closer to 165. For field, field investigations, 93. We are on par with that too. We're about 82, I think is where we were. So 43 citation notifications for last year. 14 of those 43 were runway excursions. That's 32.5%. A third of the airplanes just couldn't stay on the runway. 3 of them were taxi excursions, or 3 additional were taxi excursions. So now we're up to 40% of our numbers for last year. We're just, people couldn't keep them on the pavement. We had 6 bird strikes. I'm including these just because there's more than 2. We got a trend here, right? What's interesting to me, when I went through those numbers on the bird strikes, 3 of those happened in 1 week. And they were, I think it was the first week of November, which is 2 weeks away. So those of you on your way home flying north, please watch out for the geese. We had somebody hit a fox, and then we had 3 nose gear collapses. I don't know that that's a trend. I went ahead and put the model information in there for you. And I know you're going to do breakout sessions tomorrow. I think we're going to have our tech folks run through different model-specific things. So if you have one of these models or you have an issue associated with a nose gear collapse, or we had 2 cracked windshields, I mean, I guess 2 is a trend, but there's your 510 and a 560 XL is what those models were associated with. So that's a pretty large chunk. That's 29 of them. And I decided to go ahead and include the other 14. I ran through this information for the MBAA Technical Committee that came to Textron earlier this year, and they enjoyed it, and I figured you would too, because you may have one of these models, in which case this might be applicable to you. We had a 680 that had a bleed leak and emergency press enunciators. They descended, landed without incident. Now that's all we get, okay, for notification. That's all we see on the FAA preliminary run. Didn't become an incident or an accident, but it was enough to make the run. They landed without incident. So customer service would have followed up with that, if there was any follow-up at all. It didn't happen in our office, but we recorded it. We had a 560 aircraft climb through 2,000 feet, then it suddenly descended. Crew recovered at 200 feet and landed without incident. Again, whew, talk about a near miss, right? No accident, no incident. These folks totally got away with it. I don't know if you're in the crowd, but whoever did this got real lucky, okay? That's all we got. We had a 525B, engine oil press fluctuations, a cap was found unsecured. We had a 525 gear door detached in flight. And we had a 560 left main gear strut did not fully extend after takeoff. The airplane still thought it was weight on wheels. Had associated systems pressurization, the transponder, thought it was in ground config mode. Came around, landed, replaced the main gear seals. No big issue. It sounds like a maintenance issue. It was taken care of, and move on. We had a 500 reported an autopilot issue and some steering issues, and then it descended into a residential area. This is one of the preliminary case studies I'm going to cover a little bit more. 510 had no throttle response at altitude, descended, throttle control regained, and it landed. That's all we got. 650 had an engine flame out. Relight was successful, landed without incident. We had a 525A with a cabin altitude annunciator light, descended, landed without incident. And a 560 brake fire after landing that they put out. And I don't know what caused it, but that's what we had. 560 XL had a hard landing, put a main gear through the wing. That was traced back to a maintenance issue, a trunnion bolt, I believe. We had a 560 brake smoking after landing. They found some leaking fluid. No fire, but potential. 510 instrument approach descending terrain, investigations ongoing. That's the one in Germany. I'll cover that in a few minutes. And then we had a 560 with some stiff elevator controls. They got looking into it and found the left microphone jack was wrapped, trapped between the forward elevator torque tube and structure. They repositioned it, no big deal. But that's it for all of our notifications. So, what was so funny? Did I miss something? No, so those are the notifications. That's all 43 of the citations that we had last year. Preliminary case studies. So these are the accidents that we investigated. Now, this one is different in that it's actually finished. The final report has been written. I talked to the NTSB investigator in charge of this accident to find out if the probable causes had been issued yet, and it has not. I think there was a holdup. They were waiting until they had a full 5 board members. I don't know if you're familiar, but 2 were just recently confirmed. So I think you'll probably see a probable cause for this coming soon. But because this final report is done, I've got a little bit more information in the case study as I go through this one. I'm also going to talk about the 500 in Georgia, and the 510 in Germany, and the extra one is our 525A overrun in Michigan City, Indiana at the end of the year. So jumping right in, here's our first runway excursion. Happened January 16th, 2017. It was a 2015 Cessna 525C. Good look at CJ4. You can see that's the photograph of the airplane before the accident. Happened in Howell, Michigan. Serial was 196. A little map to give you the lay of the land and what's going on here. A guy took off out of Genesee County Airport in Batavia, New York. Flew over to Livingston County Airport in Howell, Michigan. This is the radar approach, or radar data of his approach into Livingston. So the final report is out, and this is all right out of the final report from the NTSB. The pilot had listened to ATIS, had used the FMS to determine the landing performance at the runway there. Said the next rad showed rain in the area, and the onboard radar did not. He knew that there might be ice on the runway and was prepared to go around. He said as he's coming in to land on this runway, he looks down, he sees another airplane at the end of the runway. He figured they were going to go flying, which led him to believe that the runway was A-okay to land on. It was not. Those 2 were actually just out there running the engine on that. They were doing maintenance on the airplane. They had reported back to the NTSB. They were asked to do like a witness interview with the board. Pilot mechanics said the taxiways were icy. They didn't get out on the runway. They just crossed at the end there. There was mist and light rain in the area. And they said that they were monitoring CTAF. They were on it. And this guy did not use it to inquire about the runway. He never called and said, hey, what's going on down there? The airplane comes down, lands on runway 13. Guy hits the brakes, gets little to no braking action. Has that response, let's go around, retracts the speed brakes, the spoilers, and the flaps, goes to take off power, and he gets shimmy, and the aircraft starts to yaw left, decides to just eat it, pulls power back, uses the rudder to maintain heading, goes off the end of the runway, goes down a hill for about 1,275 feet, hit a fence, crossed a road, hit a whole bunch of trees, and he came to rest inverted. Weather was not good. 3 statute miles in the light snow, sky was overcast at 5,500. The National Weather Service had actually issued an urgent winter weather message talking about freezing rain, and they were talking about accumulations up to 0.2 of an inch, 1/4 inch ice around there. Airmets for most of the central U.S. also had icing in IFR conditions. He knew what he was getting himself into. FAA inspector actually lived very close to the accident site, about a 10-minute drive. He said it took him 20 to get there because of the ice. He was on site right away, said, yep, it was all covered in ice, had difficulty getting to the location. So these are photographs taken by our accident investigator on site. Standing on the road, looking up towards the end of the runway, you can see the ILS array at the end of the runway. Just to the right of that array are the tire tracks, and you can see the damage to the fence. So the photographer has now moved over, looking up the hill. You can see the tire tracks coming straight down towards the photographer. Turns, you can see the fence damage, you can see the fence out in the street. Hits that little ditch up and over the road and split those 2 pine trees right through them and took the tips off. There's a little close-up there of the debris field. Left wingtip and aileron wrapped around one tree. Took the whole right wingtip and aileron in one whole piece right off of the right side and wrapped it around the other tree. Scattered pieces of the airplane. Here you can see the main gear sheared off. They're right there, fence fragments and other associated stuff. Right here is the entire one-piece wing. Probably what saved his life is the fact that that entire one-piece wing ripped right off of the fuselage because it burned. It completely burned up. Not as bad as I would, probably because it was laying flat on the ground like that, but pretty good post-impact fire on those wings. Plenty of fuel on board. But the fuselage broke free from that wing, kind of rolled a couple times, came to rest inverted. He undid his seatbelt, fell on his head, and climbed out of the main door. There's a shot of the site. As you can imagine, recovering a CJ4 is not an easy task. That's a little blurry because it was raining at the time, but the amount of forklifts and cranes and straps and stuff in order to get that thing up and off the ground onto a flatbed. So here's the learning portion of the presentation. So let's talk about performance data on a CJ4, landing on an icy runway. At 14.5, 108 knot approach speed, no wind, wet icy runway. Anybody want to take a guess? What's it going to take to stop on that runway? My most favorite answer was 4 miles. That's what I heard before. It's not too far off. It's really closer to 3 miles. It's actually 13,625 feet in order to stop on an icy runway per our books. That runway was 5,002 feet long. Saying I got a shot, right? No, not a chance. So that was it that's our runway excursion, early in 2017. Now in March of 2017, we had a 500, in 1976 500 in Marietta, Georgia, serial 303. That's the accident airplane, 8 Delta X-ray. This one took off out of Cincinnati, going down towards Atlanta, Georgia, basically due south. He had reported, he requested radar vectors direct to Fulton, said that he had autopilot issues. It was not working and he was having steering problems. ATC lost radar and radio contact. He's about 15 nautical miles north. Weather, not all that bad. It's overcast at 5,500. So in the NTSB preliminary report, there's some witness information. It's pretty good witness information. One witness says he saw that airplane at about 1,000-foot AGL, well below the cloud layer. Nothing was unusual until the aircraft made a complete 360-degree roll to the left and entered a steep 90-degree bank to the left. Then the aircraft rolled inverted and entered a vertical nosedive. He was quoted in that report saying the airplane entered a slow counterclockwise spiral as it started its dive. Pretty detailed information from an eyewitness. And then it disappeared behind trees. Another witness said the aircraft made 2 complete barrel rolls with the nose slightly elevated. During the second one, the aircraft slowed, nose pointed down, aircraft began to spiral counterclockwise. Again, pretty similar. We got a spiraling issue here, something lost of control. Did not recall hearing engine noise. I don't know how close this guy or witness was to the accident site, but that was in the prelim. The accident site itself, aircraft came down into a front yard of a home, residential neighborhood. Wings, or nose level and wings level. Essentially a flat spin, and just kind of went splat in the front yard of this home. There were power lines and trees very close to the home and the accident site. None of it was hit, which was, again, good site information about how this thing came down and impacted. Single person on board, pilot, was fatally injured, and no ground injuries. Witnesses, residents on site immediately captured photographs, and this one is still an open, ongoing investigation, so I don't have a lot of additional information or any of our accident site photos I can't share with you because we're still party to the investigation. But these are photographs that were published in news articles. They came in at night, secured it, firefighters still cleaning up the site. There it is the next day under security by the sheriff's department, and the investigators were en route. They worked it the next day. We had one of our guys on site along with several NTSB investigators. They launched a couple extras out of DC to come down and take a look at this. That's our investigator. That's my coworker, Henry. He dug into the tail and found the CVR. No, it was a flight data recorder. There was a flight data recorder on board this aircraft. He identified it, and then he went over and he grabbed an NTSB guy and said, hey, there's a lot of press around. You probably ought to be the one on camera pulling this thing out. So he did, and they got a picture of it as soon as it came out. The NTSB is still working on this. This happened in March of 2017. It's late 18 at this point. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen the final yet, but I think there's been some ongoing investigation early this year on this accident. So it's probably maybe the end of this year, maybe early next year, you'll see a final report on it. When it finally does come out, I think it's going to be an excellent extended case study. So I hope at some point I'll be able to bring that one back to you, and we'll revisit that. But that's all I've got on that 500. The 510, which probably several of you are curious about, It crashed last year. It was our first loss of a Mustang. Happened December 14th, 2017. It was a 2007 510 in Waldberg, Germany. There's a photograph of the accident airplane in its former glory. Had departed out of Frankfurt, Eagles, Frankfurt, Germany, and was on its way down to Friedrichshafen, kind of southeast. Took off at 1743, and this is all information that's coming out of the BFU, which is the German equivalent of our NTSB. They did an excellent interim report. With the NTSB and a preliminary report, you're likely to get maybe 3 paragraphs of information. They did, I think, 22 pages. Excellent, wonderful detail. For any of you who have any additional questions or want to read up on it, just Google BFU interim report. I think it's one of the first things you'll see is this Germany report. They took off at 1743, got up to 21,000 feet. ATC then kind of stepped them down, 17, 15, 11. At 1805, the crew was in contact with Swiss radar. They were vectored to the ILS, runway 24. At 1806, they were on a heading of 140, descended to 090. 1810 down to 6, 1811 down to 5, 1812. Turn right to 150, descend to 4,000. 1813, Zurich calls them up, Zurich arrival, and tells them right heading, 215, cleared for the ILS approach, 24, report established. They acknowledged it correctly, so that's at 1813. Radar controller then noticed that the aircraft overshot the extended runway center line at 240 knots indicated, which is highlighted in their report. Entered a high rate of descent. ATC contacted the aircraft and got no response. That high descent and that flight through the localizer, which is represented by this red line with the kind of the cross hatching through it. This is the flight path. Flew through the localizer, made that right turn to re-intercept, and rapidly descended into terrain. This is that same data, just projected a little differently in Google Earth. You can see the flight path proceed through the green line. The magenta line is the flight path, and then the quick rapid descent down into terrain. And that little box right there, which is hard for me to read too, says aircraft is 150 to 200 foot AGL at that last spot in the white box. And then this is the last radar contact point here, and then ends up impacting trees. Less than a minute later, 1814, into the trees in Waldberg. The report said it flew with high speed and a flat angle into another forested area about 1,000 meters away. 2 crew, 1 passenger were fatally injured, and there was a post-impact fire. Weather was not good. Visibility looks decent there, slight rain. Sky condition was scattered at 1,700, overcast at 2,500. End of twilight was at 1821, so this is 7 minutes before dark. It's still dark, and there's snow in the area and a lot of clouds. Weather was not good, and this was in their report. This is a shot right of the radar as he flew down into it. There's a big old blotch right over the airport where he's trying to get into. So I assume that at the end of the day, they're probably going to have weather as a contributing factor in their final report. The 10 minutes prior to the accident, another Mustang landed at that same airport. That pilot reported, and this is all noted in the report, that it was windy and there was some turbulence between 7 and 5, and the wind lessened during the descent. Also said that there was only slight ice during that descent and that he never turned the boots on. During the approach, there had been snow and sleet. But as much as weather may be a contributing factor, it certainly doesn't sound like it, does it? This guy didn't have any problems. And it got down to 3,500, was clear of clouds, runway lights in sight. So by the time he was supposed to intercept, probably should have been A-OK. At least that's what that leads me to believe. Here we are again with our flight path, the magenta line. That little cluster of trees that's sticking out right here, kind of looks like a little green peninsula here, is the area where the left wingtip was found. They didn't find this until a couple weeks after the accident actually occurred. The left wingtip and aileron were found out here. Flew about a half a mile more and then impacted this other swath of trees. Here it is again, kind of from an aerial view. This represents the first initial impact. The aircraft flew over the village and then into this ellipse here kind of shows you the path that it cut through the trees. Came to rest inverted and burned what was left of it that had not been fragmented by the trees. We were invited to participate. Henry worked this one as well. Henry jumped on a plane early this year and went over to Germany. There's more than just the Mustang in that photograph. This is the hangar that they have there at the BFU. And they went through it piece by piece to make sure that everything was there And the Germans were very appreciative of our assistance. So just kind of walk you through it and show you. There's the left wing tip and the left aileron laid out on the floor and some portions of the left wing laying in front of it. So that was the outboard left aileron. Here's our inboard left aileron with the trim tab. There's our speed brake. There's a portion of the wing in front of it. There's our flap on the outboard section, left side, inboard left flap right there. Work your way across to the right side. Inboard flap was there, outboard flap was there, and then the majority of the right wing and outboard, right aileron and outboard wing were there also. And you can see the impact crushing damage on the tip, kind of tapering. Left horizontal stabilizer and elevator. All these pieces and parts were pulled out of the pile and laid out so they could determine impacts and angles, things like that. There's our rudder. All the instrumentation pieces and parts. They dumped out all the bags of stuff that had been collected and were able to piece back together the instrument panel. The standby instrument cluster up there kind of at the top. And this is all in the hands of the BFU. I'm not sure what additional testing they're doing, but I imagine there will be testing. In addition, the engines sitting on pallets. These had been planned as well to be looked at further. So I'm sure you'll see more on this as it goes. This was just in December of last year. We went, like I said, and that interim report, if you're interested in reading some more, was published in March of 2018. I have a feeling several of you have probably already read it. Another case study. This is the extra I decided to throw in here. The end of December. December 27th, 2002, 525A, Michigan City, Indiana. That is the accident airplane. Yeah. 525 Kilo Tango. Took off out of DuPage, going into Michigan City. Pretty similar radar track as we had in the other overrun, but there's the approach getting lined up. This was actually, this got a lot of attention at the NTSB because it was a Part 135 on demand passenger flight. Passenger was not on board, but this was the pickup leg. They were on their way over there to get the passenger. They flew the RNAV runway 20 approach. Weather was not good. 4 statute miles with light snow. Scattered at 1200, broken at 19. And we've got video. Which is really kind of how we got involved in this investigation. The security cameras that recorded this video put it into a format that was very difficult for the NTSB to work with. They reached out to us because they know we have a visual media group. And they sent us the raw video, and we took it to our VMG folks, and they were able to convert it and to dice it up, and we actually have multiple angles of this accident. So you'll see him coming in over the hangar. You see the flashing light. He's going to land kind of right behind the numbers there. So this just shows you they were able to use this video to tell you that he's about a third of the way down the runway by then. The next video kind of happens fast. Give you a better idea just how much snow is sitting on that runway. There's touchdown. There's the rooster tail of snow. Here's another angle. Same kind of deal. Not slowing down much in that one. Still a lot of snow on the runway. And then we've got the departure. And he's just going to keep going and going, not much slowing down at all. Until it goes behind the fence right there, and that's pretty much it. Oh, he's off the runway at that point. Departed the end, hit a fence, hit a highway barrier and some terrain, came to rest in a cornfield about 930 feet away. Separated the left wing at the root. There was impact damage on the vertical stabilizer as well, probably a fence post or something. Pilot and co-pilot had minor injuries. This just give you the lay of the land, show you an airport diagram, landing to the south here, and then the thumb tack down here at the bottom shows you the accident site off the end of the runway. There's the highway barrier that he went through. Those posts look pretty stiff. It's probably what tore that left wing right off the airplane. There you go. Again, 2 minor injuries, and let's see, one of our investigators actually did go up and take a look at this airplane a few weeks after this incident occurred, and we followed up with them. As far as performance data goes, last radar target, 0.2 of a mile from the runway, 168 feet, 108 knots. The AFM shows the gross landing weight. Aircraft needs 2,540 feet to stop on a dry runway. For our book with an inch of snow, anybody want to guess? 7,100 feet. That runway, 4,100 feet. Read your books. Read your books. Know your performance charts. Yeah, that's another runway excursion. Okay. Doing good on time. Okay, here we go. So, extended case studies. So that's our preliminary stuff. Anybody got a question at this point? Yeah. So he asked if there's any way they could see if the runway was covered with snow when they landed. I don't know. It was dark. I don't know if there was any reporting available to them. I don't think they saw it. Although, had they been monitoring the weather, they should have been well aware that there was snow in the area and to anticipate snow. But yeah, I'm not sure what they had prior knowledge of. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah. The CJ4 yawing problem on the first excursion, I think he just hit the throttles incorrectly, or bumped one up before the other, or it was the ice on the runway. I'm not sure why he felt like he had a yaw, but I think you spoke to this when we were at the MBAA. Yeah. One spooled up faster than the other. Yeah, there you go. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, there was a Mustang doing maintenance that had fire on the ground during maintenance. Is that what you're talking about? I believe they were doing some oxygen. So the question was about a Mustang that had a ground fire. They were doing some maintenance on the oxygen system, and I believe it got sparked off and burned up the fuselage or the forward cabin anyway. Anybody else? Okay. We'll get some more at the end. I'll go through this preliminary, or the extended case study that I've got here for you. So this is Citation 500 that I worked in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. Happened in, I kind of covered this one early for you last year. It was one of our preliminary accidents. So this was October 13th, 2016, 1974 500. There's a shot of the airplane before the accident. It took off out of Kelowna International. The intent of this flight was to fly over to Alberta, Canada at 21, and they took off at 21:33. So night flight. Took off runway 34, IFR flight plan, and they flew the Kelowna 7 departure, which tells you maintain 9,000 feet, contact Vancouver air traffic control after you pass 4, and maintain a heading of 330 till you're at the Kelowna NDB. That can be a little confusing. Fortunately, the TSB, which their final report is done, put a shot of that in the final report. So the red arrow is pointing to the runway. 330 is your heading outbound. There's the Kelowna NDB with the blue arrow, and the green arrow again just kind of shows the heading 330, which is the standard departure, Kelowna 7. At 21:33, the aircraft was half a mile away from the runway. It had climbed through 2,800 feet at this point. Rate of climb was more than 4,000 feet per minute. Climb angle of about 16 degrees. Aircraft was 3 degrees right of course, which was 330. So that's our blast off. Here we are at 21:34:01. 20 seconds later, I went ahead and put that in there so you don't have to necessarily keep an eye on the timestamp. But at this point, the aircraft's already 1.2 miles from the runway. It climbed through 3,800 feet and deviated further right of course. Rate of climb decreased now to 1,600 feet per minute. Ground speed was 150 knots. 10 seconds later, the rate of climb decreased to 600 feet per minute. The climb angle also decreased to 2 degrees, and the ground speed kicked up to 160 knots. 11 seconds later, now we're 2.1 nautical miles from the runway. We've climbed through 4,800 feet. We're 13 degrees right of course, and our rate of climb is 6,000 feet per minute. We are getting out of here. Does it sound like he's on an autopilot? No, he's hand flying this airplane. Climb angle is about 22 degrees at this point. Ground speed has decreased a little bit down to 145 feet. So he's going up, he's going down, he's going fast, he's going slow. 17 seconds later, he's 2.7 nautical miles from the runway. He's now climbed through 5,800 feet. He's 20 degrees right of course. Rate of climb is 2,000 feet per minute. Climb angle's back down to 7 degrees. if your head's not going up and down while you're listening to this, here's the parabola he flew on his climb out. Give you a better idea. What do you think his inner ear's doing by this point? I hope he's on instruments. Should be on instruments. 3 seconds later, after he passes 6,000 feet, he finally contacts Vancouver, which he was supposed to do at 4,000 feet. 4 seconds later, ATC confirms radar contact, issues a clearance, says right turn direct to Menbo, which is his waypoint out there, after climbing through 8,000 feet. 9 seconds later, he comes back and reads back the clearance, and he's good to go. Climbs now through 6,400 feet. Course of 348, should be 330. A little reminder there for you. Rate of climb is 2,400 feet per minute, ground speed of 170 knots. 39 seconds later, he's climbing through 8,300 feet. Rate of climb, 3,000 feet, starts his right turn. He's now reached a maximum altitude of 8,600 feet. And that's when he goes into the steep descending right turn. Consistent with characteristics of a spiral dive is what is the quote in the TSB's report. Here it is. So the dashed line is where he should have been flying. The yellow line is where he flew, the radar track. There's our dashed white line over here going over to Menbo, 125 miles away. Right after he gets his clearance, he's at 8,000 feet. He begins that right turn, goes into that descending spiral, and the red dot represents the impact point. Here's another example of that radar plotted out for you. And keep in mind, this is 5 miles, only 5 miles away from the airport, and all this happened in less than 2 minutes. At night, into mountainous terrain. Came down in a hurry. Actually came over some trees and had cut them in such a way that the TSB really wanted to get an angle on it, and it was 67 degrees. Nose down attitude from where he clipped the trees to the impact crater. As you can imagine, highly fragmented. Pieces and parts of this airplane were spread out all over the place. Pilot and 3 passengers that were on board were fatally injured, and a considerable post-impact fire consumed a lot of the airplane and burned up a lot of the forest area. So, as is kind of typical with us, whenever there's a citation accident, we usually launch 2 investigators, just because there's just so much work to be done. And these investigations blow up into a lot of additional things we like to collect. One of which was a wreckage diagram. So I was the tag-along. I didn't write the report on this one. I was the extra guy. So I did a lot of the photography, and I did the GPS wreckage diagram. And this is just a snapshot of show you the large area of all the pieces and parts and things that were spread out. This is an example of the wreckage path. That is the initial crater, and then just the dispersion of the wreckage through the trees. And little pieces just spread out all over. Parts hanging in trees. They actually brought a team of tree trimmers, 2 guys who worked for, I don't know if they were with the National Forestry Division in Canada. They came out with the ropes and stuff and the boots, and they climbed trees and cut limbs in order to get pieces and parts. This one was low, so I was able to take a picture of it, but there were several other pieces in the trees. There's a shot of an elevator. So we were going through this piece by piece, trying to identify every individual part, and we did. We were able to come up with the whole airplane was there. There was no in-flight separation. Identifying pieces and parts of the engine manufacturer came out as well. Another example of pieces and parts hanging up in the trees, and the post-impact fire damage that was charred on several of them. At the end of the day, the TSB came back with a final report that the circumstances of the accident, consistent with a loss of control, due to the pilot becoming spatially disoriented, which resulted in a spiral dive. They also have findings as to causes and contributing factors in the report. In this case, they cited the aircraft departed control flight for reasons that could not be determined and collided with terrain. The TSB was a little frustrated with the fact that there was no recording device on this aircraft. There doesn't need to be. However, that was one of their main recommendations that came out of this investigation. So you may hear some of that from the Canadians as you go forward. They would love it if everybody had a flight data recorder and or a cockpit voice recorder on board. So would we, honestly, in the accident investigation world. But that was one of the big things that came out of this because it could not be determined. This was right out of another familiar report from the FAA or the NTSB that talked about spatial disorientation. Spatial disorientation is not a phenomenon. It is a real thing. This happens more and more frequently. We have seen this as a cause to accidents, which is why I wanted to bring this case study back to you and revisit it and remind you to get on your instruments, be proficient, practice this stuff. You have got to be ready. Whether you go into a dark hole or if you're flying through clouds, you have got to be able to transition to instruments very quickly and fly proficiently. They talk about it in the intro to aviation physiology, spatial disorientation, loss of proper bearings, or a state of mental confusion as to position, location, or movement. Anybody who went through flight training probably sat in the spinny chair, and you put your head down, and you picked your head up, and you said, oh my God, which way am I going? That's what we're talking about. Factors contributing include changes in acceleration, flight and instrument meteorological conditions, frequent transfer between VMC and IMC, and unperceived changes in aircraft attitude, which is exactly what you saw in that climb out, up and down, fast and slow, which is probably, well, that's why we have a probable cause of spatial disorientation. Anybody got a question? Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. One more time. That was one pilot. That was a single pilot operated aircraft. And there was some odd little backstory on some of that, and not too much of it made it into the TSB's report, but in order to fly single pilot, you have to have a working autopilot. He had done some maintenance to that airplane, and I'm not sure that he had a working autopilot. He had a gyro issue that was later reported by his son, and said that Dad had been flying the airplane by hand because he didn't trust the autopilot. And that climb out certainly shows that that was a hand-flown climb. Anybody else? Yeah. Good point. He says that airplane also stopped at the end of the runway, asked for some extra time, probably for the gyro. Probably hoping that it gets spooled up. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. I don't know if you're hearing this. He said that the pilot wasn't necessarily too happy about his passengers, that they delayed his flight multiple times because they wanted to have another beer.
Canceled the flight, but on this particular flight, he needed to get home himself, so he went.
So he needed to get home himself. It sounds like a little bit of the get-there-itis in this case. For those of you who weren't familiar, and I guess I forgot to mention that, one of the passengers on that flight was the former premier of Alberta, I believe. So essentially essentially one of our state governors in Canada, the equivalency of that. And they had been over there, I think they were just playing golf and having some fun, so having an extra beer sounds like a good time. But as the pilot, yeah, that just delays you even further. So that's excellent input. And that's something I guess I probably should have shared earlier on when I took that pause on that slide, was that, you know, I know it's a small community. Aviation is a very, very tight-knit community. And I've learned that many times over the years as I've done these presentations. You may know these people. You may know these airplanes. Some of you may have owned these airplanes. If you have additional information to offer, I love to hear it. So please, catch me on a break. Afterwards, we can talk. I'll be around through Saturday, so please, I love to hear the stories. Anybody else? A question on this one? I'll do this last case study. I decided to bring a single with you this year. I did this at an IA convention. So I'm an A&P mechanic with inspection authorization, and I go out and talk to the IA conventions. Usually in March timeframe, I do a couple of them. And I took this one this year because this was one that was fairly recent and current, and the probable cause had been issued. This happened in September 27th of 2016, Laytonsville, Maryland. It was a 1981 172P. There it is right there. Looks pretty good. Great training platform. Background on this accident. So this is a pilot mechanic, one guy, he's a pilot and a mechanic. He had actually gotten in his car and he drove over to Montgomery County Air Park in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And he picked up this airplane and he flew it back to his home airport, Davis Airport, because that's where his toolbox is, and to do his maintenance. It's about 5 nautical miles away. He gets back to his home airport, he does maintenance on this airplane. When he's finished, he gets back in it, departs runway 26. Right after departure, he reports engine failure. He comes down into a cornfield, and rather than a nice smooth landing off field, he ends up stalling it last minute and pretty much plunks it nose down into the cornfield. He was fatally injured, and a post-impact fire just completely burned the fuselage away. There's Davis Airport, kind of in the upper left corner, departs to the southwest here and makes that left turn and gets over to here, and there is the accident site. I guess being party member gets us a lot of excellent information and gets us kind of on the inside of the investigation, and a lot of times I get police photos, and in this case they were on site right away and have photographs of the firefighters putting the airplane fire out. They came over with an airplane and took some aerials as well. So this is one that was provided by the police department. Because it was so close to Washington, D.C., they launched one of their drone flyers. He brought his UAV, took a bunch of photographs, stitched them together, and provided us a nice overhead view of the wreckage site. You can see the tail kind of bent over to the side there, and just how much of that fuselage was burned out. Now, I was on site in the rain the next day, and these are my photographs. There's the fuselage. Just give you an idea of how much is gone. It's just burned right down to the ground. So, what happened? He came over to his home airport, and he parked his airplane, which you can see over on the right side of the screen there. That's it, and the cowl is just sitting on the ground, standing up right there. He parked it at his home terminal right in front of a video camera, and he performed all of his maintenance on camera. I'm not going to show you this video because it's 4 hours long, but we watched every bit of it. And what you see during this video is he does some landing gear maintenance. He gets into the cabin a couple times, and he does an oil change. He takes all the oil out of the airplane. He never put any oil back in the airplane. Which answers the age-old question, how long does it take for a Lycoming engine to seize? About 5 minutes, because that's what we got. The engine came off the fuselage, went back to a hangar. We tore it down. You can see connecting rod 1 and 2 are pretty good there. Number 4 up here, the journal, is missing the rod. You can see the thermal damage and just how scorched that steel is. The rust has already set in from the firefighters and the water that was on this thing. The number 4 connecting rod is still on the other side of the case because the piston had been seized inside the case. We gathered up excuse me, all the little pieces and parts that we could out of the oil sump, including the rod cap fragments. Photographs here, the oil pump was seized and locked up, and the propeller showed us no rotation, which just corroborated the story, and what had happened here is that the engine seized and there was no rotation on impact. At the end of the day, this is the probable cause. This is the analysis summary, and it tells you what I just told you. The video did not show him adding engine oil before reinstalling the engine cowling and departing on the accident flight. So the probable cause, which is at the bottom of that sheet, is that. It's a little bit hard to read, so I blew it up for you there. The pilot mechanic's failure to maintain airspeed following loss of engine power, which resulted in exceeding critical angle of attack, and he stalled the airplane, essentially. You know, this is survivable. The engine out shouldn't kill you. Should have been able to land it. And then the cause, what was also causal to the accident was obviously the fact that he failed to put oil into the engine. I cannot stress enough how important it is to not miss a step. And I use this in the maintenance world, but I think it applies as a pilot too, with your checklists. If you are running a checklist and you get distracted and you feel like you have missed a step, go back to the beginning of the checklist and run the checklist. Do not miss a step. Do not make the fatal error of being forgetful and missing something that is so critical that it costs you your life. That is just kind of the point I wanted to make with this investigation. I think this one is kind of shocking. I like that reaction when everybody hears that, you know, because I think we've all been there. I think we've all missed stuff. We're all very forgetful. It's just kind of human nature. But you've got to do your best to not let that happen to you.